I'm Ariella Morkwitz, the founding director of SVIVAH. We have beautiful new faces here tonight. Thank you for coming. Please stay at the end to introduce yourself if you're up for it. I promise I won't run off. 30 seconds about SVIVAH. SVIVAH is about revolutionizing the way that women come together in community and using Jewish community to empower women as individual change makers in our own lives and in the world, discovering and exploring the unique and beautiful Torah that comes from our lived experience, and doing all of this within a very special community of care. We define both Jewish and women very broadly. If you want to be with us, we want you with us and welcome. We love that we are multi-generational and diverse in our backgrounds and affiliations, and we come together in celebration and support of women, our strengths, our unique perspectives, and our ways of impacting the world. We are going to Jordan for making tonight happen. Thank you also to the Covenant Foundation, who constantly encourages us to find ways to bring women together meaningfully, thoughtfully, and to learn with and from each other, and to the Aviv Foundation, who has supported us from the very start, and to our wonderful community partners who also think there should be more strong women running around the world right now. SRE Network, Prisma, and Maharat, they are all three of them fantastic organizations, and I encourage you to look them up. Thank you all for the amazing work that you do lifting up women. Speaking of lifting up women, before we get started tonight, we wanted to take a moment to celebrate and honor the work of the Gender Equity in Hiring Project, which has been a longtime partner of SVIVAH's, pioneered and led by Dr. Sarah Shapiro-Plevin. Sarah, who I actually just hung out with earlier this week, founded Gender Equity in Hiring when she saw a real need in the Jewish community to promote gender equity in the Jewish professional sphere. She came into her work to create standards of practice that benefited everyone and ensured that the Jewish community was really living its values when it came to how it was treating its hardworking, dedicated Jewish professionals, which by number is also happens to be majority identified as female. Gender Equity in Hiring is actually sunsetting this summer, and we just wanted to share a moment of appreciation for Sarah's tireless work and thank her for the impact that Gender Equity in Hiring has had on so many of our Jewish institutions and professionals. We are all indebted to you and so very grateful for your leadership and your advocacy. Thank you, Sarah. You have made our community better, and we know that you will continue to do so. I am so excited to learn with all of you tonight, and I am ready to take notes. I am very grateful, as always, to Rabba Dahlia Davis, our Director of Pastoral Education, who literally moved mountains, check out her muscles, to make tonight happen, and to Rabba Lisa Sperling, our Director of Education. I am the luckiest human to get to work with these people every day. Rabba Dahlia, let's do this.
Thank you so much, Ariella, and it is an amazing privilege to work with you. So when I think about imposter syndrome, the first image that comes to my mind is a magazine. It arrives at my door a few times a year and brings with it a whole host of emotions. This alumni magazine that my college sends me might have been intended to keep me informed on what is happening on campus, to raise funds and other things of that nature. But what it does in reality is it offers me an opportunity to read the class notes, informing me about what so many other graduates are up to in their lives. All their degrees, professional achievements, Nobel Prizes. It's an opportunity for me, not really, I don't know, they might have Nobel Prizes, I'm just being, I'm exaggerating to make a point. It's an opportunity for me to spiral into a series of questions that are ultimately all one and the same. How can I stand among these amazing graduates and pretend to be like them? Look at them and look at me. I am an imposter. However, what I have learned from our incredible Her Torah teachers at our program a couple of weeks ago, entitled Stepping Up When It Is Hard, and what I have learned from the conversations I have had with Ariella and Rabbanit Elisa planning this program, and what I have already learned from the few moments I had to spend with our amazing, amazing teachers tonight, Rabba Yaffa Epstein and expert coach Jen Kogan, I have learned that imposter syndrome is not just the experience of feeling that compared to others, you are less than, but it is so much more encompassing and so much more far-reaching. And it is so much more than comparing your accomplishments with those of your peers. When I think of imposter syndrome now, which by the way, we will learn tonight is not the correct term, I'll let Jen teach you more about that. When I think about it now, though, it is clear to me that feeling like an imposter is also tied to so many other feelings. I'm going to list some of them, and as I do, feel free to either put up an emoji or make a note in the chat if there's something that also resonates for you. So, to me, imposter syndrome is also feeling like we are not enough, feeling like we have to hide our emotions, feeling like we have to hide elements of who we are and what we think in certain situations, feeling misunderstood, coming into a space and not knowing what to do, and feeling embarrassed and uncomfortable asking for help, feeling like people are making assumptions about us, feeling like our voice is not welcome or not important, and therefore it is not worth sharing. I wonder how we can feel comfortable being who we truly are in this current moment, when the world is so uncertain, when we have endured and continue to experience a time of so much hardship. How can we feel comfortable being who we really are, particularly now, when many of us are actually reconsidering who we are, thinking about what we stand for, and wondering where can we truly feel like we belong? These questions are big and heavy, and I'm so grateful that we have two incredible experts here tonight to guide us, to share their wisdom with us, and to allow us to ask these questions in a place that is safe and warm and where we are among friends in such a welcoming community. So tonight, we're going to begin by learning from Rabba Yaffa Epstein, who will add to these layers the additional dimension of what is Jewish imposter syndrome. Rabba Yaffa Epstein is the senior scholar and educator in residence at the Jewish Education Project. Formerly, she served as the director of the Wexner Heritage Program and the Wexner Foundation, where she designed and implemented the educational and leadership experience of volunteer leaders throughout North America. She has also served as the Director of Education of North America for Pardes Institute of Jewish Studies and was a member of the faculty. And you can see her entire bio in the chat, but I want to point out one particular thing, that Rabba Yaffa also gave a phenomenal TED-style talk about this exact topic. And it was just a gorgeous mix of Torah and inspiration and brilliance and fiery energy. And Rabba Yaffa, we are just thrilled to learn from you tonight. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, and I'm very grateful. Thank you so much. It's such an honor always to get to be with SVIVAH and this beautiful community. It's always just so good to be together, and there's old friends here and new friends, and just I just admire the work that you all do so much, Ariella and Eliza and Dahlia. Thank you so much for all that you do, and Jen, it's a real honor. I'm so excited to learn from you. So it's wonderful to be here. It's funny because like I definitely don't consider myself an expert in the imposter syndrome except for having it. Like I think I'm an expert at having it, that's for sure. And I have a lot of imposter syndrome. And I also have to say that I was once commissioned to teach what we're going to learn together for a group of, I won't say where it is, but it's probably obvious to guess in the Jewish community, for a group of award-winning educators. I was hired to teach a session on imposter syndrome. That was what the educators wanted to learn about. And I was like, I don't understand. You are literally award-winning educators. Why do you need a session on imposter syndrome? And it really taught me a lot about that this feeling is just pervasive. It doesn't, and by the way, it wasn't all one gender. I'll just say that. It was mixed genders. And it really taught me so much about how this is that we all feel that we're not enough. And what is the work that we have to do in order to shift that thinking, or even, and Jen, you're going to teach us about this. I know, I'm so excited. Or even to think about how we embrace that feeling of not enough and what it can teach us. So I'm really thrilled and honored. And the other thing that helps me, because I'm a Torah teacher by profession, is to look at our heroes, to look at our ancestors and to notice that even our greatest ancestors, the leaders of our people, the most important and famous leaders of our people, really all had this experience where there were moments, as Dahlia said to us, where they felt not enough. And um, and I want to explore a few of those moments. And then I think, what are sort of like the hidden messages that the text is teaching me about how I can use those feelings, and who are my allies, who are my people as I think about how to deal with those feelings. Okay. So I'm going to share my screen if that's okay. And we're going to start with, can everybody see that? Awesome. So we're going to start with, wait, there we go. Okay. The most famous, I think, Jewish leader, who is our hero and ancestor Moshe. And I truly think if there is someone who had imposter syndrome, it was Moshe. Literally, we're going to see it in a minute. He literally said to God, nope, do not choose me. I'm not the person for the job, right? So it doesn't get more imposter syndrome than like, me? You're picking me? What? Hello, you're God. Don't you know better, right? So that's coming in a minute. But before that, I wanted to explore a little bit his origins, right? So obviously there's a lot to talk about in terms of Moshe's origins. One thing that I want to point out that I think is really fascinating that comes out of the text that's really important, and we're going to see it with Esther as well, is this idea that Moshe is somebody who grows up fundamentally, his youth and his identity is fundamentally in question, right? He is by definition a foreigner in a palace, or depends how you understand what happened. At the very least, if you don't think he grew up in the palace, at the very least, he was raised by two mothers, the text teaches me, right? An Egyptian mother and a Jewish mother. And that already, his identity is fundamentally split. And we see that identity split come to a head when he is a young man. And I'm here now in source number 1. He's a young man. Moses has grown up. He went out to his kinsfolk and he saw their suffering, right? He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. Now, there's a big question in this text whether Moses knows at this point that he is Jewish or not. I don't know. And the text doesn't tell us. It tells us his kinsmen, but we never see him saying that they're his kinsmen. It tells us that. So that I think is a very fascinating question, whether Moshe knows he's Jewish. And the reason he gets involved is because he sees an Egyptian beating one of his brothers, or is it simply that he sees an Egyptian who is his brother, right, beating a human being, another human being, right? Where is he saying, oh my gosh, this can't happen. My people can't be suffering this way, or my people can't be inflicting this suffering, right? It's really an interesting question of what he's experiencing in that moment. And then perhaps one of the most famous lines in the Torah, he turned this way and that, and seeing no one about, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand, right? So Vayifen and Kovacho, he looks both ways. There's a lot of conversation about what this means. He looks both ways, right? One way to understand this looking of both ways is that he looks to make sure no one else is around so that he can do this action of beating, of killing the Egyptian, right? In other words, he's checking to make sure no one's watching him. Now, if you look at the text that way, it's fascinating because essentially it's a much more premeditated act, right? But sometimes you could understand this text. Another way you could understand it, I'm sorry, is to say he looked to see, oh my God, is anyone else going to do something about this? And I don't know if anyone else has had this experience, but you're like, look, something happened. You're looking around, you're like, where's the adult? Where's the adult? Oh no, it's me. I'm the adult. I'm the adult in the room. I gotta fix this, right? There's no other, right? Vayar ki ein ish. Like, there's no one else to step in and take responsibility. It is on me. And that is one of Moshe's, I think, incredible leadership skills. When he feels there's no one else to step up and take responsibility, he steps up to take responsibility, okay? Of course, it doesn't go very well because the next day he sees two Jews fighting and he says, why are you fighting, right? Like, I just saved you from these, these Egyptians I saved. And they say, oh, really? Now you show up, right? Who made you chief and ruler over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian, right? Moshe was frightened and thought, oh, the matter is known. This is always like an amazing moment because it means who knew that Moshe killed the Egyptian? Moshe and the Jew that he saved. And the Jew that he saved goes home and tells the other Jews, right? So this is like a really fascinating moment for Moshe where he learns a few different things that are important. One, he steps into responsibility, but that has consequences. And it's not clear to him that he's able to really convince people that he's on their side. And he then becomes terrified and runs away. And finds another instance where it's actually very interesting because if you look towards the end, he sought to, right, when Paro heard of the matter, he sought to kill Moshe. Moshe fled from Paro. He arrived in the land of Midian, sat down beside a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock, but shepherds came and drove them out. Moshe rose to their defense and he watered their flock. So there's actually another moment. So there are 3 real instances where Moshe comes to the defense, right? And each of them is very different. The first one is an impulsive, rash moment of taking responsibility. The second one is trying to resolve conflict between equals, if you will. And the third is to, again, defend the defenseless. They're calm and measured, right, responses, which is sort of an interesting phenomenon. And I think there's something important to understand. When we don't feel secure in our own identity, there's a way in which we can be incredibly reactive. Right? And Moshe, I think, is an example of that. He knows he's responsible, but he is reactive. Then, as I referenced before, this is source number 2 on your pages, on the screen, I'm sorry, right? That Moshe says to God, God calls him and says, Moshe, you're going to step up and step into responsibility. God calls him and says, no, God, what are you talking about? Do you remember the time when I tried to get involved with words between 2 Jews? Remember what happened? They didn't listen to me. Now you want me to go free a whole nation with words? No, that's not me. You have the wrong guy. That's not my skill set, right? And, right, I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. I'm not the guy who can speak. And God said, what are you talking about? Who gives man speech? Who makes him dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, God? Which is another very important question in this conversation, I think, about imposter syndrome, is how do we allow ourselves to truly believe in our own divine image? And that when we allow those negative thoughts, that self-doubt to creep in, can we say to ourselves, no, I was created in the image of God. God is the one who gives me the gifts that I have. And I have a responsibility to use those gifts. Okay, self-doubt, I hear you. But my divine, that overcomes. Okay, we're going to leave Moshe for a minute because I have 6 minutes left and we still have to do 2 more characters. I want to look together, and I'm just going to go straight to the moment. Okay, so I want to look together at Esther because it's actually, to me, also quite fascinating. Actually, wait, hold on. Come back up here for one more second quickly. It's actually quite fascinating to me about Esther, Queen Esther as well. And I know we had a whole SVIVAH learning about her very recently. But it's actually very interesting to notice that Esther is the only character who has 2 names in the Hebrew Bible, right? She is both, well, I know Moshe does too, but that's okay. Let's leave that for a minute, right? But in terms of the shot level, in terms of really understanding, right? We have here the Tanakh, the book of Esther tells us here in source number 3, verse 7, he, Mordechai, was foster father to Hadassah. That is Esther, right? And to notice that Esther has both a Hebrew name, which is the name Hadassah, and Esther, right, which is the name of the goddess Ishtar. So she has both a Persian name and a Hebrew name. Again, this is the text telling us, again, it's this struggle with my identity. Again, I'm a Jew who is in a palace that is not my own. I have to hide myself, right? And and Mordechai comes to her and says, right, when the Jews are in danger, you have to step up and step into your power. You were put into this. Who knows whether this is the reason that you've come to royalty? And Esther's response to me is very amazing because it's not just that she says, okay, this is like Moshe, okay, I'm going to step into my power. There's another thing that she does that is incredibly important, which is she says, you want me to step up and step into my responsibility? then go and gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan. Then we have to make this a communal national issue, which, by the way, I think is such a fascinating and interesting point, because one of the things that imposter syndrome does for us is it makes us feel incredibly lonely. And we don't share our sense of self-doubt. I once was about to teach at a very important plenary event, and I was standing next to someone who's a very prominent Jewish educator, and I said, "Oh my God, I'm so nervous." And he said to me, "Oh, you're not supposed to say that." And I was like, I am supposed to say that. This is important to me. This is how I cope this is how I deal with my imposter syndrome. I share it because, first of all, it's impossible for me not to, those of you who know me. It's just coming out anyway. But it's helpful to me to think about, who are my allies in the room? Who do I turn to? Who are my Lech Knos et Kol HaYehudim, all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast for me, and neither eat nor drink for 3 days, right? I won't do it. I will fast in my manner as well. And my maidens and I will fast too. But we're going to have a parallel here where we understand that this is not always an individual issue, right? But actually, self-doubt is something that plagues all of us. Fear is something that plagues all of us. It's not on me alone, and I don't have to carry the burden alone. Yes, sometimes I have to be the actor who does the thing, but I don't have to carry that burden all by myself. Okay, with my last 2 minutes, I want to do one more, I think, really interesting story, which comes from Vayikra Rabbah. And it's about Rabbi Elazar, okay? And to me, it's like so classic. Once Rabbi Elazar came to a certain place, so this is a story of, and this is not uncommon for the rabbis, that they would travel from town to town, and different rabbis would go and they would learn new customs and they would learn about each other. So he comes to a new town, and they say to him, "Oh, lead us in the Shema." And he says, "I don't know how." And they say, "Okay, fine, lead us in the Amidah, in the morning prayers." He says to them, "I don't know how." They say to him, "Is this really the Rabbi Elazar everyone makes such a fuss about? Does he even merit the title rabbi?" Right? Which is such a loaded conversation about, who do we think our spiritual leaders are? What do they think? What do we think that they should know? What do we expect from them? What are the communal norms that prove that we're worthy of having our titles, worthy of our positions, right? What is the fear that underlies sometimes our work when we're scared to show what we don't know, to be vulnerable like that? He was very brave and saying, "I don't know how to do that. You want me to do that? I don't know how," right? His face fell and he went to his teacher, Rabbi Akiva. He said to him, "Why do you look unwell?" Akiva asked his student, and he told him what had happened. He said to him, "Well, will my master consent to learn from me?" He said to him, "Yes." And so he taught him. By the way, a beautiful moment of humility by the teacher where he calls his student my master, right? But a beautiful moment of, okay, you can learn. You're allowed to learn. So he teaches him, he returned to the same place. They said to him, "Lead us in the Shema," and he did. Lead us in the morning prayers, and he led them. And they said, Rabbi Elazar itchasam, he became solid. Look what happened. He didn't know how to do it, and then he did. And I think that there's also a piece of all of this where we have such sometimes ridiculous expectations of ourselves. I will share this. This is my last story, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jen. But to me, this is very interesting. I taught for many years at Pardes, and I had the honor of teaching beginners Mishnah or beginners Talmud, and which is such a joy and incredible thing to introduce people to the rabbinic text. And I had one student who was herself an experienced leader in the Jewish community, but she had never learned the Talmud inside. And the first day of class, she was learning with her chavruta partner, her learning partner, and she was crying. And I walked up and I said, "What's wrong?" She said, "Why don't I know this? Why don't I know this already?" And I said, "Well, have you ever learned it before?" And she said, "No, I haven't." I said, "So why would you know it? You haven't learned it. You wouldn't expect yourself to know a foreign language that you didn't learn, or foreign law, ancient Greek texts if you never learned them before, right?" But there's something about specifically Judaism where we feel like we're supposed to know it all. And if we don't know it all, we better be quiet and hide that quietly inside. But actually, what Rabbi Elazar, this story is teaching us is, it's okay to not know. It's okay to be a big, important rabbi, a big name, and not know. It's okay to be Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher. It's okay to be Queen Esther and not always know. And we have to look for those people who can remind us of our divine image. We have to remind ourselves it's okay. And we have to have the courage to admit what we don't know and be willing to learn. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabba Yaffa. That was truly beautiful. And it really kind of brings out this piece of like, we need to remind ourselves of the people that can help us to do this, and who can help us learn. I love this. You're allowed to learn. And that's really what we're here to do tonight. And to do that is as in a community, just like Esther gathered her people, we are gathered here to do this together. And so now that we just did our Torah learning section, and we're going to hold that Torah in our hearts. We're now going to go from here to here, and we're going to get our hands dirty. And what we wanted to do tonight, in addition to learning Torah, was to really have an experience where we could work through this topic and have an expert coach guide us and make us think and make us write and make us do whatever else we're going to do, which I don't even know all of it. And I'm so excited to see and to find out. So tonight we have Jen Cook in here, and she is going to guide us through. And she is featured on ABC and MSNBC and TEDx. And Jen is an internationally recognized executive leadership coach, a speaker, and a best-selling author with 25 years of experience empowering leaders to break barriers and lead boldly. Known for her no-nonsense style and relatable humor, she has guided nearly 10,000 global leaders, including Fortune 1000 CEOs, to drive transformation, to real transformation. And we want to wish Jen a mazel tov because this week her book came out. It is called Make Imposter Syndrome Your Superpower. And it gives women in STEM actionable tools to transform self-doubt into a leadership superpower. And we'll share more about her book. And Jen, we are so honored to have you here. And thank you so much for spending your time with us tonight.
I should unmute myself. That would be good. Thank you so much for having me. And Rabbi Yaffa, I learned so much from what you just taught. I made notes. And I have to say this for myself. I had oral surgery a week ago, and this is my bruise that's left over from the oral surgery all the way down to my neck here. And all I could think was, did I make the doctor mad? And was he trying to strangle me? Like, what was happening? Anyway, so I want to say that because in case people had questions or it kind of took you out of being completely here tonight. I'm going to share my screen. And oh, I also want to say before I do that, thank you to SVIVAH for having me here. I had no idea about this organization. I'm so excited and happy to be part of this community. And also my dear friend, Yvonne Marzouk, who's on the call, who recommended that I come in and share about imposter syndrome with you. So thank you to everybody. It's been wonderful to get to know the team, and I look forward to getting to know so many of you. Okay, sharing my screen. Here we go. And then the other thing to know is, for the most part, I won't be looking at you all. I'll just be looking at I mean, I kind of will be. So I know that they're going to be monitoring the chat. There's things I'm going to ask to be put in the chat. I'm not going to be looking at that, but I know the team's going to, if there's something that I need to focus my attention on, I will. So let's just, the first thing I'm going to say is this, and I say this to everybody. Here's how you can get the most out of this webinar. First of all, nothing I'm going to say tonight is the truth with a capital T. It is based on my years of experience. It is based on my research. So generally, when we are learning Torah or we're learning something, or even having been in school, and I saw a lot of comments about people that are educators and either Jewish educators or I don't want to say regular. I feel like that's disrespectful, but you get what I mean. It's additive, right? You learn this thing to get this thing to get this thing. This is not that. Because if we're trying to learn something, then we're going to be putting it through our filters. And I'll talk a lot about the neuroscience behind imposter syndrome. We're going to be putting it through our filters to see if we agree or disagree, because that's the way the brain works. The way the brain works, it's never actually ever dealing with reality. It is only ever dealing with its interpretation of reality and comparing things to figure out safety. So this webinar is going to be very experiential. And I'll tell you more about what I mean by that. So number one, active participation, put things in the chat. Make sure I'll have time at the end for you to ask questions. Ask questions, please. Don't take notes. What? Who's like, no, I have to take notes? Because that would be you coming to this webinar from an additive learning perspective. Instead, take note of your aha moments. Oh my God, that just occurred to you. Wow, I've never heard that. That sort of a thing, rather than trying to write down everything I'm saying, because that will make no difference. Information makes no difference. Do you know how I know? I know what it takes to get six-pack abs. I do not have them. There's so many videos and YouTube videos and Instagram reel. I don't have them. So information in and of itself doesn't make any difference. When we come with an open, curious mind and we're taking in the information and allowing it to kind of bounce around and be in wonder, things will come to us that we'd never seen before. Those moments, like when a scientist work, when they're bumping up against issues and problems and solutions, and then all of a sudden they see something they haven't seen before. That is my wish for you in this webinar, that you at least walk away with one nugget that makes you go, whoa, I hadn't thought of that before. So take note of your aha moments. And then the other piece is connect and share, right? Make sure you're engaging with the other attendees, that kind of thing. All right. I love this because someone in the chat said, yeah, and this whole thing syndrome, right? It doesn't even make sense. It's ready? Imposter syndrome's not a syndrome. A syndrome is a medical diagnosis. There is no such thing. I'm going to say it louder for the people in the back. Kidding. I'm not going to. People use it, myself included, because it ranks high with SEO. It's what people are searching and Googling. But in truth, where this came about was in the 70s. These two researchers, academic researchers, were studying women in academia who had very advanced degrees, were going for their PhDs, and they consistently felt like a fraud. And back then, they thought it was predominantly women. I really think that's because we talk a lot more about our feelings. Just like Rabba Yaffa was saying, like, no, I don't feel like I'm nervous right now. I have to tell you, if I'm not ready to puke before any presentation, I shouldn't be doing the presentation. And I'll give you one other nugget, which is if you'd never experienced imposter syndrome, you're not playing a big enough game. Because it is an amygdala hijack, and we'll get into this. So these researchers coined the phrase imposter phenomenon. They didn't call it a syndrome, they called it imposter phenomenon. And if you've ever seen the Muppets, phenomena, bum, bum, na, 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 phenomena, beep, 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 that's how you can remember it. So it's a phenomenon. What does that mean? It's phenomenological, meaning it's an as-lived experience. It's what's happening in the moment, the body sensations, the butterflies in the stomach, the like heart palpitations, the pressure, the sweaty pits. I'll just say it. It's all those experiences we have in our body. So it's an as-lived experience. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say about this. Give me 1 second. I'm just looking at my notes. Oh, the other piece is women. National Science Foundation 3 years ago did a study of people in business, and 71% of all leaders in business stated they experienced self-doubt at one point or another, men and women. As Dahlia said when we first opened up, I've coached a lot of people, and there's not one person I've ever met who hasn't had a moment of self-doubt. You have self-doubt because you're human and because you have a brain. So let's just start with that. It's imposter phenomenon. And some very famous people have had these doubts. In fact, I used to have a Google alert for whenever imposter syndrome was mentioned, and I had to shut it off because it was overwhelming. Here's some very famous people you might have heard of. People like Maya Angelou, who thought when she was writing her 12th book, there was going to be a knock at the door and people would think, oh my God, she's running a scam on us. Or Margaret Chan, who used to be head of the World Health Organization, who shied away from being known as an expert. And I noticed there were mentions in the chat about being around who you deem as other experts or someone calling you an expert. Having gone through COVID, having dealt with whatever medical situations, I want someone head of the World Health Organization who embraces being an expert. And the final one I love is Albert Einstein, who thought of himself as an involuntary swindler. So you are in good company. We have come by these experiences very honestly. But first, let's talk about some of the basic, and this is not every type of imposter phenomenon, but these are just some that you might identify with. And as I'm going through them, just put in the chat what I usually say to people. People say, "Oh my God, I have everything." You probably do. We all do. But if there's one that right now is sticking out like a sore thumb more than the other, or one that has, just put that in the chat. So persistent self-doubt. These are folks who doubt your abilities and accomplishments, no matter how accomplished you are, and that you really haven't earned your success. You attribute it often to luck or, oh, but it wasn't me, it was the team. How often has somebody said, great job? You're like, yeah, it wasn't me, it was the team. Well, who's leading the team? Moses. Who's leading the team? Esther. Like, right? The other one is perfectionism, feeling like you've got to get it right all the time. They feel like you feel like your work's never good enough and it's got to be perfect, and probably you avoid taking risks until something is perfect, or you're constantly tweaking things because it's not perfect. But if you look up the word perfection in the dictionary, or perfect in the dictionary, it specifically states it's a state of mind that can never be attained. There is no such thing as perfection, and being made in God's image, we are perfect, whole and complete as we are. And sometimes we have a barrier to how we express ourselves, or how we relate to ourselves, or our confidence in ourselves. And tonight, you're going to get the tools to be able to unlock that brain pattern that has kept this persistent self-doubt or perfectionism in place. A couple other things: fear of failure. Despite how many successes you've had, it just never feels like enough. Or discounting praise. Again, I kind of mentioned it when I talked about persistent self-doubt, but even when somebody says to you, great job, you discount it. And here's what I think about discounting praise. I equate it to, okay, we show up someone invites you over for dinner, you show up with something, right? You could show up with a dish, a plant, a bottle of wine, whatever. That would be like me showing up at Ariela's home, and I'm there for dinner, and I have this beautiful, beautiful bottle of wine and some daffodils because it's spring. Maybe I'm showing up for Pesach because we're in that season. And she goes, "Oh, Jen, it's so great to have you, but leave that crap outside the door." Understand that when somebody is praising you, people can only see in others that which is within themselves. We are a mirror of others. The way that you are inspired by somebody else that would allow you to give voice and articulate that praise is because you know in your heart that is you. So it's like giving someone a gift and saying no, thank you. And we would never do that. But somehow praise is not for you, it's for the other person to give you that gift and for you to receive it. Some of the other ways that you could have imposter phenomenon is overachievement, constantly going after that other degree, constantly taking on more projects. It doesn't matter how much you've done, it's constant, constant, constant. And undermining your own achievements. You just kind of downplay it like it's no big deal. And I think, Rabbi Yaffa, you were saying that when you said we went to speak with these experts, and you're thinking, why am I here? Because you're an expert. So I'm assuming people put that in the chat. Yeah, they put in the chat which one they identify with the most. Okay. I was meeting with my team today, and they said, oh, one of the most Googled phrases is, how do I overcome imposter syndrome? Now, in 3 years ago, there were 2.4 million tips, tools, and tricks how to overcome imposter syndrome. And as of January of last year, there were 3.1 million tips, tools, and tricks. Remember what I said about how information doesn't make a difference? Why the increase is people somehow think that a tip, tool, or trick is going to help you overcome it. You can't overcome it. Here's why. I used to live in Colorado. I love hiking, and I live outside of DC. There's a mountain called Old Rag. And when you get to the top of this mountain, there's a big, big rock, giant rock. I've got to come over that rock, right? So I've got to scramble over it. And I'm scared of heights, so I don't even care how high it was. I needed help. I mean, I could scramble over it. Maybe I come across that rock and I can go around it. but it keeps the rock stuck. And the more you try to convince yourself that you can overcome it, the more that brain pattern stays stuck. And we're going to talk about brain patterns, and I'm going to take you through a 5-minute guided meditation so you can uncover one of the core brain patterns that has allowed you to perpetuate this experience of doubt, perpetuate this experience of fraud, because you came by it all honestly. And it's never anything dramatic, and it's never anything traumatic. As far as I can tell, with all the thousands of people that I worked with, it is something that's happened under the age of 12 that is either related to your sense of belonging. And as Jews, we know a lot about that, or our experience, our relationship to authority. So you can't overcome it. That's the bad news. Somebody said, how do we deal with this? Tonight, you're going to get to the triggering incident, or the defining moment, as I call it, so you can identify the brain pattern, because managing your mind won't work. Somebody says to me, if you're in a bad mood, or something's happening, or the way the world is right now, and everybody is having their ups and downs, and you wake up one day and you're in a terrible mood, if someone says, oh, just think positively, I honestly want to throat punch a person. Can I say that? Like, in all truth, because I'm like, no. So you can't manage your mind, but we can get to the source of it. But let's first talk about limiting beliefs. What are they? These are negative thoughts that hold you back from reaching your potential, and they're about yourself, your skills, ability, etc. But here's the deal. A belief is simply a habit of the mind. So what happens is we get to this defining moment. There's something that happened, and all of a sudden, that moment that happened, and I'll talk more about this, and the strategy, this is why I say imposter syndrome is actually your superpower. It is not bad at all. It has propelled you to great heights, and I'll take you through some examples. So that moment of, oh God, I got to get it right. I'll give you one right now. I had a client who, COO of a major trade organization, but was so hard on herself and felt like her boss was very hard on her. And what we got to is, when she was 9 years old, she brought a C home on her report card. And her father was in the military and kind of had this gruff voice. And all she remembered was, he'd be like, what's with the C, Catherine? And she goes, but Dad, it's average. Give me 1,500 words on average. And all of a sudden, in that moment, there's a sense of fear, because here's her dad, who she's always felt safe around. In this moment, that gruffness triggered shame, triggered embarrassment. And she's thinking to herself, I never wanted, well, she's not, the brain is thinking, I got to protect myself. I got to make sure that this never happens again. So she, without even realizing it, as a 9-year-old little girl, said, I'm going to get it right. I'm going to get it right. I got to get it right. I got to get it right. As the COO, who's accountable for finances and HR, that propelled her to great heights. She was very much accountable. The problem was, she was never satisfied with her work. She couldn't celebrate or be joyful in her successes. And she heard everything that her boss said to her through that negative lens. So her 9-year-old was in the driver's seat of her life. And it's like when you have these brain patterns that you can't see. And by the way, what I've figured out over the years, people have like 5 or 6 that are really core. When those brain patterns haven't been identified, and the work we're going to do today, you can do it later and apply. And I'm going to be, by the way, at the end, giving you an ebook with my framework that you can read if you're a visual learner. I saw that there were 2 people on the call who are blind, and I hope you have a way to interpret that so that you can listen to it also, because I didn't think of how to accommodate that, and I apologize. In that moment, you do come up with this superpower. So what we're going to do tonight, you'll be able to replicate. Here's the thing. Your belief, like I said, is a habit of the mind. It's the same thought you've had over and over and over and over and over again. Because the moment you have an amygdala hijack, and that is the reptilian part of the brain, a brain pattern happens. And the brain's just waiting for it to happen again. Because when that brain pattern happens, it's come up with a way to deal with it, just like Catherine did. I'm going to get it right to avoid that embarrassment. You keep having the same thought, same thought, same thought, same thought. All of a sudden you think it's true. It was literally a habit of your mind. So let's talk about the amygdala. Let's talk about the brain, shall we? Let's talk about you and me. So all limiting beliefs, by the way, I'm a stand-up comedian too, so we're going to have a little fun. I hope that's okay. All limiting beliefs come from brain patterns, and these brain patterns are a direct result from a response to an amygdala hijack. The average person has, give me 1 second while I take a sip of water, please. The average person has something like 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day. 80 to 85% are negative. 95% are repetitive. So we don't really stand a chance in a lot of ways. The purpose of that, though, is the brain's job is to keep the thing it's a brain of alive, which is you. So throughout history, it's been physical safety, but now we deal with psychological safety. And the reason we're all here and cave people, wada wada, and ooh, 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 aren't is because they got eaten. Because the brain's constantly trying to determine the threat level. Again, remember, neuroscience tells us the brain's never dealing with reality. It's constantly taking in information and filtering it through all the other information you have to determine the threat level. Except because the brain can't deal with reality, it doesn't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger and getting ready to speak on a stage. It thinks it's the same threat level again and again and again. So this experience of imposter phenomenon activates that threat response. And I want to do a demonstration, and I'm hoping either one of our hosts would do this work with me. So I want somebody to work with me. Who'd be willing to come off mute to work with me? Yeah, Arielle, you want to do that? Okay. Now, what I want you to do is I'm going to ask you, I'm going to flip the slide, and then I'm going to ask you to read the words under perception versus reality.
Paris in the spring.
Okay, great. Now I'm going to ask you to read them one more time, and I want you to take your finger and point to every word on the screen.
Paris in the spring.
See? Perception versus reality. Just put in the chat if you saw it, say I did. Majority of people never do, and it's not a problem. Thank you. Round of applause. This is how we do a round of applause. Okay, we've got to go around, round, round, round. Again, perception versus reality. So how do we differentiate perception and reality? That's kind of hard, Jen. You just told us the brain's never dealing with reality. So how the heck can I discern that? This is mindfulness. This is, Viktor Frankl says, you know, it's the lengthening the time between action and reaction. This is meditation. This is what I'm about to teach you today, is another method of mindfulness to increase that span between reaction and action. So the moment you walk in to teach your classroom, you become the observer, and you notice all the thoughts, feelings, and body sensations you're having instead of thinking they're all true and it's all real and there's some threat in the classroom. So how do you make imposter syndrome your superpower? We're not going to overcome it. We're going to make it our superpower. We're going to get to the source of the brain pattern that put your unique version of imposter syndrome together. Everybody want to do that? Yay. Okay. So this is where we're going to do a short meditation, and I'm going to time us. Give me 1 second to pull up my phone and my clock on my phone. There we go. Okay. Now, everybody, have your journal and pen nearby, but take everything else off your lap or what have you. And I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to plant your feet flat on the ground. And I want you to put your hands on top of your thighs. Okay, so let's start with that posture. And I want you to start just deeply breathing. Just start to breathe deeply. In and out. And notice if you're shallow breathing, if you're just breathing with your chest or your belly, and make sure you're taking some lovely cleansing breaths in through your belly and your chest, and then out, chest, and then belly. And as you're taking these deep breaths, see if you can just slow your breathing down. Don't fall asleep, but see if you can slow your breathing down. And feel the chair underneath your bum. Feel the floor underneath your feet. Feel the sensation of the air in the room. Notice if there's any smells that you can smell, like maybe somebody is cooking or something like that. Notice if there's any taste in your mouth. And keep breathing deeply. And as you continue to breathe deeply, I should start my timer. As you continue to breathe deeply, I want you to imagine there is a cord of light coming down from the heavens through your spine, through your head, the top of your head, through your spine, and out your tailbone. And it is descending into the earth's crust. And I want you to imagine there's a hook on the end, and just hook yourself right there. Hook yourself to be anchored by the earth and anchored by the ground and anchored by Mother Earth. And then I want you to imagine that same cord of light going back up through your head into the heavens with another hook and hooking you from the heavens and the earth so you're safe. You're connected to your breath. Continue to breathe deeply. Now, next thing I want you to do is I invite you to think about the last time you experienced imposter phenomenon, that moment of doubt or questioning, or you felt like you didn't belong, you felt like a fraud. And as you remember that moment, telescope out to about the 50,000 foot level so that you're like an eagle witnessing it, as if you're a director in a scene in a movie. And I want you to think about what happened and notice what time of day it is. Notice who you're with, what happened. Was it with friends or colleagues? Was it with family? Was it with a particular person? Notice in your body where you feel any tension. Maybe you feel butterflies in your tummy, or heaviness in your chest or on your throat, or maybe you notice you're hunching your shoulders or clenching your toes or clenching your thighs or something like that. Just take note of where you're feeling that in your body. And sometimes we don't have really clear memories. It's okay. I want you to notice the body sensations. Take note of any mood you're in, any emotions you're having. And when you get that clear in your mind, I want you to go back to an earlier similar experience, maybe 10 years earlier. And just whatever comes to mind is the right memory to bring up. Think about that memory. Again, telescope out. What kind of a situation were you in? What was said? What were you wearing? What time of day was it? What did you hear? What were the feelings in your body? Maybe you smelled the outside, or maybe you felt cold during that time. And when you get that really, really clear in your mind, as clear as you can, and again, these memories may not be logical. It's whatever memory comes up for you. I want you to go back to an earlier similar memory of some other time where you felt doubting yourself. You felt like you didn't have the expertise. You felt out of sync. And once again, telescope out 50,000 foot. Notice everything again, like you're a director in a movie. Oh, we were in the bedroom and it was, sunny out and I was playing with my brother and I, whatever it was. Notice all of that. Notice the body sensations. Notice your mood, the emotions that are arising. And then finally, when you get that clear in your mind, I want you to go all the way back, probably before the age of 12, when you were a little kid. And this is your earliest, most similar memory. Again, it doesn't have to be logical. Just let your mind wander and go with it. And once again, telescope out to that 50,000-foot view and notice what happened. Take note of who was there, what was said, where you felt it in your body. Again, maybe you want to put a hand over your heart or your throat or wherever you felt it. That's fine. Or maybe you had tension in your head. Again, notice if you're clenching a part of your body. Sometimes we carry stress in those moments in various parts of our body. So just notice that. These are all tells. And when you have that earliest similar moment, I want you to open your eyes and grab your journal and begin to recall your experience. Reflect on the earliest and most similar moment. Reflect on the memories and the feelings and the sensations, and be descriptive. No bullet points if you can avoid it. Be descriptive. Again, imagine you're writing this scene in a movie. So be very descriptive, use language to describe it. If you remember what was said, sometimes we don't. Some people don't have, are not able all the time to remember their childhood memories. That's fine. Notice the body sensations and the mood you were in. That's really important. And go ahead and write all that out. I'll give you about 2 minutes to write. Write out as much as you can. And I will tell you when the time is up, but you have another minute and a half. Write out as much as you can. Whatever works for you. Like I said, did your breathing change when you remember these times? Did you feel any tension or relaxation? And I should have started with, I am not a trauma-informed therapist, so if you've had an experience of trauma, you should stop when you were in the middle of that memory. And I apologize that I didn't remember to do that. I generally do. And we have about 1 more minute, but you can take some more time to write if you'd like to do that. And when you are done, I know not everybody is on screen, but when you're done, just give me a thumbs up that, yeah, I wrote the stuff out. Cool, I'm good. Just so I get some sense of how people are doing and if you need more time. We have about 40 seconds left. Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Rabba Yaffa. You could also do the reaction, like the thummy emoji thingy too, if you're not on camera, because you don't need to be on camera. Thank you, Jordan. Okay, stop wherever you're writing. And now I'm going to ask you to do something. I want you to look back over what you wrote. Thank you, Lori. And I just want you to circle the facts. Who, what, where, when. No why, just the facts. The facts and the facts and the facts and the facts. And after you've circled the facts, hold up the number of facts you found. Hold up your fingers for those or put it in the chat. I'm not looking at the chat though, so somebody could look at the chat and see what people are writing. How many facts when you circle just the facts, just the who, what, where, when? 3. Thank you, Leah. 3. Thank you, Rachel. Anyone else? How many facts did you find? Just hold up fingers so I can see. 5. Okay, Dahlia, thank you. 2. Thank you, Eliza. This tool, by the way, Anytime you are what I like to call wrapped around the axle about anything, a relationship with somebody else, a situation at work, whatever it is, take your time, put 2 minutes on the timer, write out the whole thing and circle the facts. Because what we're doing is we're that amygdala response that gets triggered when you have imposter phenomenon and you're experiencing that. In that moment, we're not going to take sharing about this, but in that moment, as the amygdala response goes up, your prefrontal cortex and your ability to logic and reason goes down. It's an inverse relationship. So just by circling the facts, we're actually creating the opposite effect. And now you can actually see the facts over feelings. And when we're able to be that witness and dial out and see facts over feelings, we're present. And when we're present, we have presence. Presence of what? Mind, body, soul, and spirit. Mind to think clearly, body to embody the kind of leader we want to be, soul to speak our truth, and spirit, God, Bob, your dog, whatever you want to call it, that still small voice that we can then hear within once the noise is taken away. All suffering lies in the stories we tell, and behind every experience of imposter phenomenon is an untold story. I don't want to just leave it there. Okay. I'm going to now take you through something called cracking the power code of personal responsibility. And this is the framework I use coaching all of my clients. And you notice I say personal responsibility because this framework allows you to be present and choose how you want to respond in the moment. It gives you a new ability to respond from that reasoning perspective versus reaction. It lengthens the time between action and reaction. And this is also, you will be getting an ebook from me laying this whole thing out. So you don't have to take notes on this. Just be with me as we work through it. So I call it cracking the power code. And power is an acronym. And it's a 5-step formula that will give you the ability to transform into a greater leader when you apply these same principles. But it does take mastery. It takes a lifetime of working this. As far as I can tell, I've spent 43 years working on this. And I will never not be working on this because I'm always committed to showing up as me. But when I'm in reaction, I don't show up as myself. I don't show up as my loving, compassionate self because I'm reacting to something. So the first one, the P stands for pursue the facts. And the O stands for own your stories. This is what we just did. Writing out what's been going on and circling the facts, you were able to see, and you could call stories your feelings as well. You could say own your feelings, your interpretations. You could say it one of any number of ways. So we're separating fact from fiction, fact from story, fact from feelings, fact from our interpretation. So that's number one, because as I said before, when you're able to separate those two, you can be a witness to your thoughts as thoughts, to your feelings as feelings, to the body sensations. And hopefully you wrote down some of those body sensations and those thoughts, because those sometimes can tell you quicker that you're about to have an amygdala hijack before you even know it's about to happen. I will tell you very specifically, one tell for me is I push myself back. It's my way of disengaging. I push myself back. And by the by, I was speaking on stage to a group of 250 women, and I was co-presenting, this is just in October, co-presenting this workshop with her. And when we were introduced, I discovered this later, when we were introduced, she has certifications. I don't, but I've spent 30 years coaching people, but that went out the window. I couldn't even remember what they said about me. And I noticed after I led my portion and she was leading hers, I didn't stay standing, I sat down. And I noticed myself backing away. And I noticed my body almost like shrinking in on itself. And we had planned to do an exercise and do a demonstration. And she looked at me. She was like, okay, well, let's do the exercise. I said, great, let's do it on me. She was like, what? I go, yeah. When we got introduced, this is what happened. This is how I'm feeling. And I shared, because I've been mastering this particular framework for so long, I was able to witness very quickly, but it does take time. It's just like, I don't know, pickleball is a big thing around here. It's like learning pickleball. It's like learning Torah. It's like learning anything. Practice makes mastery. Art, right? A language, teaching a new subject. So I was able to discern what was happening. And in that moment, when you're a witness and you have that presence of mind, body, soul, and spirit, the E stands for, I went the wrong way. Embrace a new choice. Because when you're reacting, there's no choice about that. You're in a reactive mode. When we separate fact over feeling, okay, well, how do I want to show up as a leader right now? I want to be compassionate for myself. I want to be listening. I want to be courageous. I want to be happy. I want to be direct. So you can actually choose in that moment when we're present how you want to show up and be known as a leader. And then the R is simply rinse and repeat. Reflect, rinse and repeat. Practice equals mastery. And I invite you to continue to practice this over the course of the next, several weeks, several months. And when you get the ebook, there's a cheat sheet that you can put next to your computer. You can cut my picture out so you don't have me, looking back at you, or you can, it's up to you. But because the real question is, when we're not at the effect of our amygdala, when we're not in reaction mode, who do we want to be? How do we want to be known as a leader? What is truly the essence of who we are? That those moments when we feel like hiding or we feel like we don't belong, how do I rise to that occasion? So if you would put some of those in the chat, I'd love to see if you could, if you could put imposter phenomenon aside, moment by moment by moment, and truly be yourself, be true to yourself. And by the way, the word authenticity, people Google that all the time to figure out what an authentic leader is. Stop doing that if you do that. Because the first 4 letters of the word authentic, the first 4 letters of the word author, the first 4 letters of the word authority, AUTH is the Greek word for self. So when we have authority, it's not about power. It's about having this confidence in ourselves that feels like we have this taproot sunk so deep into the ground that it doesn't matter what people say. You're like, I don't care. That's not me. And even to your own mind, oh, cool, far out. I just had the thought that I don't know what I'm doing. I just started questioning that decision I made. I just had the moment of thinking to myself, that wasn't perfect. I need to go back and fix it. Cool. Thanks, mind. Now what? Now who do I want to be? I want to be satisfied. I want to be happy. I want to celebrate. And by the way, the reason my imposter phenomenon got triggered in that speech that I was giving in that keynote is because I was among my peers. When I was 6 years old, I was in love with a boy named Keith. And I decided to chase him around the schoolyard to see if he liked me. And when I went to kiss him on the cheek, he went, ew. Heartbroken, 6 years old. And in that moment, it felt like every kid in the schoolyard was like, ha. And I said, I'm never going to put myself out there. I'm never going to be out front. And in fact, that became my superpower because my whole career in politics, in nonprofit organizations, was raising money, writing campaign plans, writing speeches, getting other people elected, passing legislation, starting organizations. It wasn't about me, it was about others. And this is when I got really interested in imposter phenomenon, because when I went into business for myself in 2016, I spent the first 3 years questioning, doubting, wondering who I really was and what do I have to say. And it wasn't until 2019 that I discovered this for myself and went, oh my gosh, this is the Keith Burpee incident. So what was happening when I went into so that's why I was saying earlier, those moments, your defining moment could either be your relationship to authority or your relationship to belonging. Mine happens to be my relationship to belonging. I had another client, Jess, who when she was 11 years old, her family, one of the branches of her family, her aunt and the family was very wealthy. And so the little cousin had invited all the other girl cousins over to go through all these name brand clothes. And so Jess went to pick up a pair of white pants and her aunt says, oh, honey, you're too big for those. Now, if that had been me, I would have skulked in the corner, quite honestly, and been like, okay, you're right. Not Jess. She was like, I'll show you. That was the decision she took in that moment. She walked into the bedroom and pulled on those white pants. But I will tell you, she never wore a pair of white pants again. When she identified this brain pattern, because the thing we could see is how it became her superpower, she became, I'll show you, as an adult, she became driven. Very successful, started and sold 2 companies, but it was never enough, never satisfied, always had to go for more, go for more, go for more. She had a husband and kids, and she could never relax and just be satisfied and really celebrate in her successes. And when we saw this, and when my other clients have seen this, when I saw this, what you realize is I had an upset 6-year-old running my life. She had an upset 11-year-old running her life. And I think I started to say this earlier. It's like you're in this car and you're going drive in reverse, and that's the only way the car goes. But the moment you're able to dial out and witness all of this and start to notice the thoughts and the patterns and the body sensations, you can keep asking yourself that question. Wait a minute, who do I want to be if I pushed all that aside, if I just moved that aside? How do I want to show up? And one thing she said was satisfied. And I'll tell you, the very next day, she went out, bought a pair of white pants, and did a whole photo shoot. So now she has pictures all over her website in those white pants. Pretty incredible. Pretty incredible. So before we get to any questions that are in the chat, I want to invite you to scan this QR code with your phone. And I love giving this talk. I always like feedback to know how I could get better. When you enter the word SVIVAH, you will see on the front thing there's a checkbox if you want to be on my email list, which I send out weekly emails on leadership. Feel free to uncheck that box. It's fine. Or get on my email list. It's fine. And if you want to unsubscribe at any time, I will tell you I will never take it personally. Once you answer these questions, it'll take about 2 minutes. You're also then going to be able to download my ebook on the power code. And this also allows me to give the folks at SVIVAH to give real-time feedback on what you thought, and it lets you tell me how I could make it better. So if everybody would take a minute to do that, that would be lovely. And I'll give you a couple minutes, and then we'll get to some open discussion. And then I have one more gift for you guys before we end. Really, it also asks you if you know other places that I can speak, because this work is so important to me to empower leaders, particularly to empower women to really be true to themselves. I have a vision of a world of people at home with themselves, where each and every human is known, honored, and appreciated for their unique gifts. And this is the way that I'm able to empower people to do that. And I think right now, with circumstances that are happening, we need all the power we can in every single moment, personally. Were you able to get it, Ricky? Any questions? I think we have a few minutes. I'm happy to open the discussion, or if there's questions or things you want to share. Happy to have a conversation. Let me stop sharing my screen, and then I'll go back and share it again when the time comes. Well, so when you think about fact versus feeling, facts are things you can see in real time. So a piano, we could see a piano, right? We could see kids touching the keys. Is there anything else about that that would be a feeling that somebody couldn't see? Like, here's my, glass. It's like, right, we can touch it. So what do you
Okay.
think?
So if it's something that's touchable, or you can, I'm not sure
You
what
can
the
see
word
it, you
is,
can
but
touch it yourself.
if
You
it's
have another
tangible in some way.
yes, tangible in some way. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it would just err on the side of anything else is our interpretation. And the kids were mean, or the kids, or I felt, those are feelings, right? Yeah. Anyone else?
It says, isn't the real problem the societal and cultural values or pressure to prove ourselves by success, achievement, or other external factors?
Yes, and yes to all of that. There is the structural framework within which we live. And the defining moments get triggered, but those moments that have defined us that become that have when an amygdala hijack has happened and it becomes a habit, it truly is some innocuous moment. And it has not because when we're born, we are these free beings, totally self-expressed, loving toward everybody, and then things happen that kind of pile on and limit our expression of who we are or our experience of ourselves. Even as little kids, we don't necessarily know about the societal pressures, we learn about them. So perhaps one of your defining moments has to do with some point where all of a sudden you realize things were different, or you felt othered, or I can think about when I moved from Michigan to Ohio. Here's the really crazy part. I remember my mother calling me and saying there's Jews with blonde hair and blue eyes. It's like, what? Because in my little hometown in Michigan, it was only Jews, and my synagogue, only Jews with brown hair and, black hair and brown eyes. And that completely adjusted my world. And when things are happening in society and those pressures, the question is, how is that impacting who you are? And are those pressures real? And even if they are, who can you be in the face of those unwanted circumstances, in the face of those societal pressures? How do you show up still as your authentic self and your true self? Is that helpful?
Another question in the chat about, can you explain more about the phrase amygdala hijack and how that works?
So the amygdala is the reptilian part of your brain. Everybody has it. That's why we're alive. Governs your breathing. And it specifically governs fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And it is that part of your brain that keeps you safe and keeps you alive. And so the moment the brain experiences feeling unsafe, feels a threat, it's going to trigger the amygdala. But you need your amygdala to stay alive. Because we know the brain's never dealing with reality, this exercise that I took you through gives you some tools to better understand what's real and what's my perception. Okay, can you speak more about how to move from that space of recognition of these feelings of doubt and inadequacy to changing how to respond and behave in that moment? Are there tricks? The framework that I took you through is the trick. That is the practice, to practice daily, noticing and witnessing what are the external stimuli that are impacting me? What are the feelings I have? What are the body sensations? So it's moment by moment by moment. So that when you're dialing out and can witness at this 50,000 foot level, the more you, just like meditation, the more you practice, the better you will be able to be at catching your thoughts as thoughts, like this transom that goes across screen. So it truly is daily practicing, Arielle. I wish there was an easier shortcut version. There's not. There's just not. I am going to share my screen one more time, and I want to tell you where to buy my book. And when you buy my book and send me, I'm going to put my email in the chat. Hold on, let me bring the chat over here. When you send me the email that you did that, I'm going to send you a free ebook so that you can have a physical book and an ebook. And the reason we're doing this is because Barnes and Noble and other bookstores want to know that it's wanted. And so this helps us. Right now, I think 15% of Barnes and Noble stores are buying the book to stock their shelves. You could also buy it at any other indie bookstore. That's fine. Just send me the receipt and I'll make sure you have a code to download your free ebook to read on your Nook or your Kindle or whatever it is. Yeah. Oh, so two separate things. Owning the expertise is simply that, owning your expertise, owning what you're good at, owning what people come to you for, what do people rely on you for, right? The other piece would be just being curious. I always tell my clients, curiosity over conclusion, right? So part of who you would be as a leader, and it's brilliant what you just said, because you're saying I'm an expert and I'm open to learning. We're going to have that duality, because one of the ways of being, when I was saying, how do you want to show up? That $1 million question, right?
Oops,
But that $1
where is
million
it?
question is, who do you want to be as a leader? And it sounds to me, Sarah, like one of the ways of being that's really important to you is being curious and being open. And you can own your expertise and still be curious. Isn't that what we do as Jews 24/7? Right? That's the thing that's always struck me. And when I try to explain to non-Jewish friends, like we question everything, right? We question, yes, there's what's in the Torah, and I'm not an expert in Jewish learning at all, but then there's different interpretations of everything. So I think it's understanding I am who I am. I'm confident in who I am. I'm owning my expertise. And you know what? I'm curious about your viewpoint. And I think that's beautiful. I really do. Is that helpful? Awesome. Yeah, the book is for any leader. I just happen to focus my attention on women in STEM because that used to be me, and that's my passion and my heart. Um, yeah.
Thank you so much, Jen. This was really wonderful. This was so empowering, and I love the way that you took us through this internal process to kind of free us from the things that we didn't even know were hijacking our amygdala,
Yeah.
so that we could have a little bit more freedom. Um, I want to invite Rabbi Yaffa and Rabbi Dalia to come in so we can process a little bit what you taught us. And I guess I want to start by asking each one of you what piece you personally are taking from what Jen has taught us tonight. Whoever wants to start first.
So I was really struck by the notion of like figuring out which are the facts. Because when I read my piece at first, I underlined every single thing. And then I looked at everyone else's numbers. It was like two, three. And I was like, oh no, I must be doing it wrong. So I had like a moment even doing this experience of like, am I doing it wrong? Am I in the wrong place? And then looking back, I was like, wow, like the our perception leads us to kind of see things as facts that really are just interpretations of the situation, and separating between those two is really a new learning, and kind of like a thing you have to work on. Like it feels like almost like learning Torah text, of like trying to interpret and parse and figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I said that I had two facts, but that was a lie. I think I had zero facts. Maybe if we want to include the girl's name, that was one fact, but that was it, really.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yafa?
I think it was all beautiful and powerful, so thank you, Jen. I think um, the most poignant thing for me that's really, and you said it a couple different times, which is a 9-year-old is running her life, an 11-year-old is running her life, a 6-year-old is running her life. And like that is very powerful to me. And I I do have a practice of being like, okay, find your adult self, find your adult, but it still is like so much work. Like who's speaking right now? My adult self, my 6-year-old self, and then like how do we embrace that 6-year-old? Okay, okay, honey, I see you. And now the adult has to come in, you know. But it's just which made me think again, how many places in my life is my child self running my life? It's just such an important question. So thank you.
And I think, thank you for that, Rabbi Yaffa. I think too, it's how do we embrace that child? Because clearly that child had an experience or a situation that has kind of, I would call it stuck energy in our body, which is why that brain pattern keeps coming up. It's stuck energy. That's why it's so important to me for people to identify the emotions and the body sensations so that we can like shake off that stuck energy, but have compassion and space and grace for that young person and kind of imagine yourself hugging that person. I always think of myself in my flannel nightgown with the little blueberries on it and hugging my little, 10-year-old, 9-year-old self in my nightgown and having me be on my own lap and give myself grace and space. That's really, really beautiful and important. Thank you for sharing that.
That's so beautiful, Jen. I mean, I'm thinking about Passover and I'm thinking about freedom. And I'm thinking that you've given us a huge gift tonight to kind of reconceptualize what freedom could be,
Mm.
right? And you are giving us the tools to free ourselves, and that freedom is not through any like huge display of physical strength, right? But it's through care and love, and through going back and hugging that little child, which I think is such an amazing new way of thinking about freedom.
Mm, I love that. I was thinking about that too as you were sharing about, the Book of Esther and that moment between Purim and Pesach and imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon. And I loved, somebody said in the chat early on, I hate calling it a syndrome. Stop. It's imposter phenomenon, right? Of how do we free ourselves of the limits of our minds? And the limits of our minds, we all came by naturally because things happen and we make up stories. That's what the brain does. That's it. If we can accept them, I mean, kids make up stories all the time and we think it's cute. But as adults, we think those stories are real. They're not. They're all made up. It's all made up anyway.
Yeah, and maybe another way of freeing that child who's running, the scared child who is leading you there, is to take one of Rabbi Yaffa's ideas, which is to find people to speak to you about it, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why I loved when Rabbi Yaffa, you said, I'm nervous. I always say that. I'm nervous before everything, but I think it's because we have something at stake. There's an at stakeness. There's a difference we want to make. There's a contribution that we want to make to others. And so when your heart starts palpitating and you have this idea and you want to contribute that idea, it's like, oh my God, I'm playing on the skinny branches. This is a growth moment for me. This is why I say if you don't experience imposter phenomenon, you're not playing a big enough game. We wouldn't experience it if we're sitting on the couch eating bonbons and watching, binge watching Netflix. We don't need that. We're going to feel super safe and comfy, but that's not where we learn. That's not where we grow. We grow on those skinny branches where we're taking risks. And I think that is the biggest damage that we do to ourselves is the unwillingness to take risks and express ourselves and provide that leadership or ask the hard question or have the tough conversation because we're so scared. But the fear is real. The body sensations are real. But what we're afraid of is the brain making things up, making up stories. So it's like a ghost story you would get told as a little kid or the monster in the closet. So if we can start relating it to, oh, that's a monster in the closet. Where'd that monster come from? I think that would be super helpful.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rabbi Yaffa. Thank you, Jen. Of course, thank you for everything, Rabbi Dalia, and to Ariella. I want to invite everybody to come back next week on Thursday night for our pre-Pesach, our pre-Passover gathering, where we will be talking about the before and after of redemption. More details to come. Thank you so much for being with us.